Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the support tier list for 14.5. So, as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton on the channel. Come by, check out the streams most nights starting around 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, usually going until about 1 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Sometimes starting a little bit earlier, sometimes a little bit later, but we're usually on around those times. So, come by, check it out, talk League, talk life, whatever you want to talk about. We always have a great community here, ready to hang out with you. Okay. Let's go ahead and get in here. So I did a patch notes video, and I'll probably release that either the same day this comes out or maybe a day before this comes out. But I don't think it's shaken up the meta that much, at least not in the support role. So it'll be very similar to what was going on last time. Just a real quick overview of like what matters for support. Brand did get nerfed a little bit in terms of his ult. I mean, 50 off max level, but realistically as support you're not going to get to max level most of the time, so it's really probably just going to be 25 off. Not a massive deal. Most of your damage, especially in the mid game, is going to be coming from like your passive Leandre's, Zazuk, your support item, so that's not too big of a deal. And then it's an extra 10 seconds in the mid game on your ult, but that's still a very low cooldown. That's not including any ability haste that you get, although he doesn't typically buy a lot of it. It should be up for most team fights, so I don't think it's affecting him, and in the win rates it doesn't look like it's affecting him that much. Evelyn getting a little bit of a nerf. She's very good against a lot of the squishy supports that are out there that like to overextend and push and, you know, are immobile when they're trying to rotate between lanes during the mid game, but I don't think this is that much of a nerf overall. She does press this button a lot, but she's still pretty good, I think. Jarvan also pretty good against squishies, you know, really good at early ganks, but I don't think this is enough to really move the needle on him. Kayn, this is for red Kayn, and the most popular is blue Kayn that you're seeing out there, so you know, this is okay, but I think blue Kayn's still going to be the go-to for a lot of people, so this is probably not going to matter in most situations. Clogmaw getting a couple of little buffs. This is not going to matter. He's still going to be too far out of the meta. He just requires too many items. It takes him too many auto attacks to do stuff in fights. Here, I'll just move this up there so it's a little more out of the way. And he's just very vulnerable, right? Like, it's super easy to gank him, dive him, all that stuff. So he just needs some help, right? I mean, if he goes unchecked in a fight and he has something like a Lulu with him that's going to be able to buff him up big time, or Emilio or something like that, then yes, he can still be good. But I just feel like there are better options that also hyperscale really well that are just more versatile, like Smolder. So I just think that he's just kind of outclassed. He's got Season 1 champ itis, basically. Maokai, a little bit less movement speed. This does matter, but just not enough, I don't think. Bramble Smash, that's only relevant for jungle. And then 1 extra second on Twisted Advance doesn't matter. Like, who cares? You're probably only casting this once per fight anyways. Yes, by level 11, this is probably what you're maxing second. You're doing Q, then W. And there's a chance if you have enough ability haste and you can get this down to like 7 seconds, maybe you cast it twice in a fight. It's just not going to move the needle. What they really need to do with him is just probably nerf his CC, like nerf the something about his ultimate and just how long it roots you, and the W maybe root it for less. They did nerf the ult a while back. It used to be 2.6 at max, and now I think it's like 2.25. But that's still a very, very long time. They could also nerf the duration on the seed so he doesn't get as much free vision. But it needs to be something other than this to really move the needle on him, I think. Okay, Nidalee changes, nerfs. It's fine. She's just bad in solo queue for most people, so that doesn't matter. Rek'Sai probably doesn't matter. Not going to move the needle. Senna, a little bit less damage on her Q. Keep in mind, this is just the bonus AD that she gets. A lot of the damage off of this. She gets so many free bonuses just off of souls. Just the base damage on this. The other AD that you're going to have. And you're only going to cast this. I mean, she does get a little bit of cooldown on it. Whenever you auto attack. But realistically once or twice maybe in a team fight you're going to be casting this, depending on how long the fight goes. And you know, you're not going to have a ton of bonus AD, especially if you get something like Umbral, which is still fairly common on her. So, you know, you might be losing out on what, 10, 20 damage each time, so maybe 40 damage max among all the rest of the damage that you're doing. It's not going to matter. They need to nerf the souls, either how many you get or how many it takes to get the bonuses. Maybe bump it up to 25. You need 25 souls instead of 20 to get the different every time you get an upgrade on it. I'm not sure. But they need to do something with the souls, I think, for her. Now, her win rate in solo queue is not that amazing right now. Although in pro, it's quite good because they play degenerate comps that specialize, you know, around her, basically. Or they have the ADC player, and then they, you know, the fasting Senna thing, where they give the tank all the gold, and Nautilus has been a very popular beneficiary of that. So pro has its own way that they use her, but in solo queue, she's still pretty good. So probably needs a little bit more of a hit for pro. Okay, Seraphine. So people are telling me Seraphine's OP, and of course there are going to be all caps videos on YouTube anytime they change a champ that say all kinds of things, but I have not seen it. The win rate doesn't really bear it out. The only thing that's positive here, like, it's mostly nerfs. Now, a lot of it is around wave clear, but the W is a bit stronger, so the cooldown is less, especially at early levels, although it is curiously more at later levels, which I think you would probably max the second as a support. But that's still, it's a really long cooldown, right? So you're only going to cast it once per fight most of the time. The mana cost is down a little bit, but you're not spamming it, so who cares? And the shield is up marginally, so you're getting like 10 more shield. Now, yes, this can like double tap. I think it's a heal, though. It's not a shield the second time. But either way, like, these are not very big numbers that are changing here. The movement speed doesn't scale as well. I mean, maybe there's something I'm missing about this. The E, if you want to max that, I guess that is more spammable for harassment and lane. But you probably still want to do Q. This could be fishing for, you know, the roots you can set up for CC more. So it's less mana, has higher AP scaling, but the base damage is lower. Slow duration is a little bit lower. Yeah, I just don't see a lot here that's good news. I mean, this is designed to nerf AD Senna. I didn't think it was that strong, but people were complaining about it. So maybe there's something I'm missing here. That's totally possible. That's getting nerfed. Her ulti is getting nerfed. I don't know. It's like 30 nerfs and a couple of marginal buffs, and she already wasn't that amazing in the support role anyways. Traditional support role, like not fasting or anything like that. Okay, Smolder got a couple of nerfs. I don't think it's gonna matter. This champ's still just extremely good. Really must pick, must ban. Like, he's pretty close to any champion on the patch. Just because you can shut him down, he is pretty garbage early, but you know, if people just get the right items, if they just get Essence Reaver, Shojin, like, you're gonna get your stacks eventually, right? And I think people have figured that out. So it's just really hard to shut him down, because just locking him out of gold from, like, you know, zoning him off waves and things like that, it's, I don't know, it just feels extremely hard to hold that champion down, even if he falls behind early. TF's getting some nerfs. I think he still is pretty good, but it's not going to affect the support meta too much. Vayne getting a couple of nerfs, probably not affecting the support meta. People still weren't picking the stuff that, like, is really good with Vayne. People weren't getting, like, Ardent Sensor champs, weren't super popular. Lulu and stuff like that weren't doing very well to begin with, so it's probably not going to matter. As far as the support meta goes, Veigar is getting a couple of buffs. I don't think it's going to matter for the meta. Wukong. Now, Wukong being stronger, I think a lot of people are sleeping on this champ, and if he becomes very popular, that does hurt a lot of high mobility champs, or champs that rely on their mobility to get in there. It's like Rakan, obviously, but then even Nautilus, Leona, stuff like that, can have a hard time getting through his whirlwind to get to the back line. And, of course, he's a very good diver himself, does a lot of damage. has that knock up. So he's I haven't looked at his win rate, but I would suspect he's going to be pretty good. Okay. Support items, so Celestial Opposition. I still think this is bad most of the time. If you can get away with getting something else that helps your allies out, it's better. But if you really need this to go into melee and you're going to take a lot of hits, they just have a bunch of really difficult to avoid damage for melees. They have Brand, Zyra, Ziggs, Abumu, all that kind of stuff. Samira. If you're just going to be getting hit and you have to go in and start fights, then Celestial Opposition is probably still okay. But I think you'd rather get something like Solstice Slay or just something else that's going to help your allies, if you can help it. It depends on how much poke they have, too, because they can poke this off of you, and that's one of the big issues, is that a lot of people are running double ranged bottom and ranged mid, and so there's just a lot of stuff that can poke these things off of you. Okay, Dreammaker. This was okay on Rakan. There aren't that many other people that get it. Obviously, some of the enchanters can get it, but a lot of them are getting Zazuk for more consistent damage. But it's weird because this is worse at lower levels. I don't remember exactly what the breakpoint is math-wise. I think it was like level 10 or 11 or something. It starts to get better. But as a support, like, the game's going to be over before you get that much higher, right? Like, you're very rarely going to see this 255 number as a support because you're going to be down in experience, right? You're roaming around, you're clearing wards, that costs you experience. You're having to go back and get more wards very often, so you're having to back a lot. You're going to lose experience there. You're just roaming and rotating between lanes. Typically, you're trying to hide out of vision, where sometimes you can still leech some experience. But the value of them not knowing where you are and being able to counter gank and set up, plays around your vision just means you're going to be missing out on a lot of XP. So typically you're down, 3 or 4 levels on mid laners and even 1 or 2 levels on the ADC. So why they made a support item scale on levels from 6 to 18 seems really weird to me. It's like you're putting too much power on the back end for those edge cases that are going to be like 50-minute games where you might actually reach level 18. And just not enough power on the earlier game, which is a lot more likely. So, I don't know. A little weird. And then Frozen Heart, they're buffing up a little bit, nerfing the armor. This will still be good in situations where you really want it, but it's probably not just buy this into anything. Like, they need to specifically have 2 or 3 like really high threat auto attacking AD champions. So this will still be a popular item probably on big tanks, but on supports, I don't know. Maybe like Leona and Nautilus will get this, but it does probably compete with Locket in a lot of situations, because most of the time you're going to want to get the movement speed item. So, I don't know. We'll see. It has other things that it's competing with. And you've got, like, Zeeks. You've got Abyssal Mask sometimes. So, it'll be good where it's good, but it's probably okay to nerf it a little bit. Okay, Heartsteel. Probably not a lot of champs get this, I don't think. But, okay. Show a bit of love there. Solstice Slay. So, this definitely will affect champions like Rakan. I think even like Maokai was getting this. It says here it was outperforming Celestial by a wide margin. I think that's true, and I think it'll still be better than Celestial in most situations. But yeah, I think a lot of the tanks were opting for this. So again, like 7% in the early game. If somebody has 1500 health, like the ADC or just whatever semi-squishy champion you're going for, 7% of that's going to be, like 70, like 105 or something, and now it's going down to 50 when you buy this. So that's definitely noticeable. And again, this one isn't as clear-cut as the last one, but I feel like it's something around level 10 or 11 again is going to be where this is positive. Where you're getting like the 150-ish type of zone, 130, 40, 50 is probably going to be a bonus. If they have 2,000 health, then it's going to be 140. So it really depends. This is going to be a nerf if you're healing a big tank, obviously, in a lot of situations. So something that has 3,000 health, or maybe a Smolder with a Shojin or something. This guy like with scaling health runes. And then the movement speed is kind of whatever, like 5% loss is a thing. The cooldown doesn't matter that much. You're casting this once per fight anyways, but that health might matter. I still think it's going to be very good. The fact that you're giving a lot of movement speed and you're giving just some kind of heal that, you know, in skirmishes is going to be at least 100 a lot of the time, you know, once you start getting to level 7, 8, or 9. So it'll still be good. Shojin down a little bit. Okay, and then these don't apply to most AP supports, don't get these items. So that's fine. Okay, let's talk about the actual thing now. Now we spent 15 minutes just kind of recapping the patch notes there. Okay, so I still think now a lot of the most popular champs that are going to have high win rates are going to be the just range. Double range bottom, super popular right now. And if you're just looking at raw win rates, you know, it would probably be something like Janna, Maokai, you know, Zyra, Brand. All of these champs are going to have pretty high win rates. But I still, and obviously I'm biased towards Rakan, but I still think Rakan deserves a top spot. If he's not top tier, I would say he's probably tier 2. And there's a few reasons for that. I mean, I talk about it every patch. They did nerf Slay, which was his most popular support item. But he can do opposition if he wants. He can do Dreammaker if he wants. I've actually thought about trying the Claw on him. What is that thing called that the AD champs usually get? Because he does count as melee. And he can get away with buying it and get out of the situation without taking too much damage. So the fact that he's, you know, an engaged champ that doesn't need Celestial opposition, probably doesn't need to heal personally off of Slay just because of his engage and disengage patterns. You could potentially try Bloodsong. Now, I haven't really done this a lot in the past on Rakan, so I don't have any experience with this. I'll have to try this out. But they keep nerfing the ranged Bloodsong, but again, he counts as melee. He was recoded a couple of years ago. So this would give you just a little bit more burst, give you more aggression early, and give you that 10% extra damage, especially if you're against some bruiser champs or tanky type of champs. This could help your team out a lot, because not a lot of other champs are taking PTA. Press the attack. I think it also stacks, even if they do take it. But nevertheless, that is an option. But even if it isn't, Solstice Slay is still pretty good. He does have a hard time in lane if you're just constantly being pushed into tower over and over again. Like your ADC is probably going to go down in CS, right? And you're going to lose lane pressure. But he is one of the best engaged champs at sustaining through that, because you get this shield that comes up, you know, fairly frequently if you're hitting Qs, if you're taking trades with your W, auto, E, you know, whenever you hit level 3. So at level 3, you can threaten to poke them, or if they get kind of low, potentially all in them, because a lot of them will overextend, you know, into your W range to try to harass you under tower. So, you know, he does have a hard time early on against your Zyras, your Brands, your Luxes, and that's a very popular type of champion. It's like double ranged probably 95% of the time in my games. But he's very good at roaming, and he's very good at the mid game, right? So if you need to rotate up and you're trying to go for Grubs or Rift Herald, or you're trying to gank middle, he's very good at that. He's one of the best supports in the game at vision control, because you can, you know, against most champions, you can go deep into the enemy jungle and, you know, get vision on their camps. You can contest vision even if someone's sitting near you, because a lot of times you can escape. Now, there are some caveats to that. You have to be careful because TF is very popular in the meta right now, and he can show up on top of you if you get too deep in the jungle. Nocturne's fairly popular with that. And there are some champs that can run you down and, potentially kill you. So you do have to be careful. But in general, he does have some of the strongest vision control. And that's what a lot of games are determined by, vision control in my experience. Especially with how many objectives there are now. Like, you've got 2 sets of grubs, you have Rift Herald, you still have all the dragons and Baron. It just feels like there's always something going on where you want the vision and you want to be able to take advantage of that if they overstep. He can also get enchanter items, although those haven't been very popular or strong, so, you can get an Ardent Sensor if you have a Fed Vein or whatever. You can get something like a Shirelia's if you are ahead and you just want to run the team down. That's not as popular right now. Most people are just going the movement speed tank item, and then either Locket or Trailblazer, and then either Zeke's or Locket. I haven't been a huge fan of Zeke's. I don't know. It's okay. Like, it does have health, armor, ability haste. So, like, the stats on it are nice. But, and the fact that it's tanky with ability haste is good. But it's like the damage is okay, but just his pattern where you go in and then you get back out, typically, especially in team fights, you're not going to be sitting there getting the max value out of that damage. If you're Leona and you go in, like, you open with your E, if you're able to do that. A lot of times you have to open with your R. But either way, you're going in and you're probably going to get at least 4 seconds of that magic damage in slow, right? So you're going to be getting like 200 damage off of this with slows. But with Rakan, a lot of times you're casting your ultimate and you're going to be running at them for some period of time, right? 1 or 2 seconds. You're trying to, a lot of times, like, bait their flash or dodge their skill shot or whatever, and then you go in with the W if you can, right? So you're already losing like 2 seconds of that. And then often when you catch somebody, you want to be able to go back out with your shield so that your ADC doesn't get blown up by their support engaging on your ADC or whatever's going on. So it's just like so many combinations of encounters where Rakan's really not going to be able to maximize that. It's obviously good if you do something like, W and just catch them with a naked W without your R, and then you're able to R them after that and then just stand on them, with that slow while they're trying to run away. That's obviously really good. So it's like, if you are ahead, if you can just sit on them with that slow in skirmishes, if you don't need to E back out, or if you do need to E back out and they're chasing your AD carry, you can use the slow to help your AD carry kite. So there are scenarios where it's good. It's obviously popular, has a nice win rate, but I don't know. I've just really favored Locket. Maybe I just haven't given Zeke's enough of a chance, but Locket has nice, well-rounded stats. You have the 30 extra magic resist on it, and Rakan doesn't get a lot of magic resist items because you're getting Trailblazer first. Now, there's quite a few games where you will get Mercury, so that does matter. You'll get the Mercs. But just being able to have some magic resist in there where you're going to be getting Trailblazer into, Locket into third item like Frozen Heart or Knight's Vow or even Redemption. Like, so many items don't have magic resist. And so Locket will give you some of that. And having that shield that, in a team fight can be a very big shield that helps out your whole team a lot. But even if it's just giving one person, it's giving you and one other person, potentially 250 extra HP. Like, that's pretty nice. The fact that it decays is annoying because it's hard to really calculate the full value of that. But nevertheless, I think it's pretty good. I do wish it had a bit more ability haste, but it really does help out, especially if they have a lot of burst damage. So, I don't know. Maybe I get Locket too much. I know a lot of pros and like getting Locket second on him. But it just feels really versatile and really helpful in almost every situation. But, there are other options. Frozen Heart can be out there. Knight's Vow is something I've considered more often if you just have like one fed person that you just really want to protect 24/7. And especially if they don't have that much magic damage. Because this guy has 300 health, so it's got 100 more health than Zeke's, and it has 15 more armor. It has a little bit less ability haste, but just that protection and the fact that you get the healing off of that is really nice, especially in extended fights. So I think Knight's Vow is definitely worth considering a bit more. I get it fairly, frequently in the third slot, but maybe even second slot if, your ADC is 5-0 or something coming out of lane. Maybe even take it second. Okay. But anyways, Rakan, vulnerable somewhat in the lane, although I would argue he's less vulnerable to poke than like Nautilus or Leona or even Maokai. But he's also, really, really good at rotating. Making plays around vision and just so versatile with the items and just how he can position in fights. He can peel, he can engage. He's just kind of like a Swiss Army knife. Okay, Maokai is still really good. These little dinky nerfs didn't affect his win rate hardly at all. It's still like 53, 54%. So maybe it was 55 last patch. I can't remember. But it's still going to be really high. He's at 53.5. And just nothing's really changed with this guy, right? I mean, he can get bullied early by poke champions. I think they did nerf his sustain. So when he just auto attacks a minion, he doesn't heal for as much as he used to. But he gets a lot of free vision control with the seeds, which still last forever. They're like 30 seconds or something. They did nerf the damage on him, but you still get the vision. You still get the slow, which helps, you catch up to him if you want to engage on him, or helps your allies hit a skill shot on him if they, face check a bush and get hit by that slow. And then, of course, you've got your W, which is, basically undodgeable. If you can just walk up to them in W, that's great. But if a gank's coming in, you just flash W on them, and, I mean, there's almost nothing they can do about that, right? If they're within 1,000 range of you, you're going to be able to get that on them. And then once you land that W for the root, you can knock them back with the Q, and then it's still got that slow. It's pretty good damage on his Q still as well. So he just has some of the best gank assists in the game. And then, of course, you've got your R, which is this just extremely difficult to dodge ability, especially around choke points, that's just going to, be massive CC. And especially when you chain that together with your W and your Q, I mean, you're going to be locking people up potentially for 3 seconds plus. So it's a lot of CC that's very difficult to avoid. Now, yes, with a really organized team, like everybody can stack up behind a tank and just have like a tank, soak that. But especially where people aren't playing tanks bottom later on, right, where it's double raged all the time, I mean, who's going to eat that, right? You're going to have your Brand or your Zyra eat those brambles? I mean, they're going to die if they do. So, all of his abilities are roots, so that means people can still cast spells, they can still auto-attack, and of course it's cleansable. It's reduced by Mercury Tread, so that is worth noting, right? Versus, Rakan's Knockup, you can't reduce that by Mercury Treads. Other stuff like Nautilus, Knockup with the ultimate. So his CC lasts for a very long time, and he has a lot of it, but it is mitigated by more things than, some of the other supports. But nevertheless, he's still really good. So I have not found a lot of personal success on him. I haven't played him a ton. I mean, my biggest concern is that he is very gankable. Right? He doesn't have a lot of escapes. He does have good vision if you keep the seeds up and if you put vision up and stuff like that. Like, he does have good vision. You can use your R if you really have to try to escape. So there are options, and it was probably just on me to position better and just realize I'm not playing Rakan. But man, it is really nice on Rakan that you can get away from almost anything, that you can pressure up, in situations that other supports just can't, even if you don't have perfect information of the jungler, and you can potentially, get away. And you can peel and protect your AD carry really well, especially if you take something like Solstice Slay. Now, Maokai can do that too. Again, right? He can do the Slay thing with his R. So, he's good. I mean, he's S tier. I think everybody's going to have him S tier in solo queue. So, still, go ahead and play him if you want. And then we got Blitzcrank. Nothing really new or fresh going on here. It's just a bunch of squishy champions that are trying to constantly pressure you. And if you land a hook, they're probably going to die. There are tanks being played in other roles sometimes, but really in solo queue, we all know most people are not going to want to play tanks. They're going to want to play carries, and Blitzcrank punishes that hard if you're able to land those hooks. Banshees, I think, got nerfed, or it's at least um, is a lot more annoying to buy it because it costs a lot more mana. So you're not going to see as many Banshees out there, and not as many people are getting the lethality bubble. Although I will say there are more lethality users out there in general, especially at the ADC role, and so they can get that item if they want to, and it does shut you down pretty hard if you have that, if you're against bubble items. But overall, I still think he's going to be very good champion in a lot of situations. I don't know if you'd want to blind pick him. You can maybe blind pick him, but he's certainly good against a lot of the meta. Although there are some champs, something like a Morgana, that's sort of a weird pick, that can counter him fairly hard. If the Morgana has, hands and has a reaction time, that type of stuff. Although Morgana, again, is pretty far off meta and just not great in general, but she is great against Blitzcrank. Okay, and then moving down, I have Senna. Now, you could put Senna up at the higher tier if you want, and some people will do that, but her win rate is down a little bit. And again, I use a combination of just win rates, my experience in games, and just kind of theory crafting the potential of champions. Just subjective thinking about it. I'm not all about the win rates, because I think certain champs, are really good and consistent for the vast, population of people. But other champs, if you spend a lot of time with them and kind of master and understand them, like a Rakan or even like a Thresh or something like that, then I think you can overperform. But Senna's one of those who's really good in pro, but her win rate is down in solo queue. She is pretty vulnerable to ganks. She does prefer longer games, and you really have to be trading well with her in lane to get those rates. Right, like you are going to get rates off of the just the minions, and that's cool. But if you're really trying to stack them quick, you got to learn how to get those, like auto attack Q, or even like Q through the minion wave and then walk up and auto attack. You got to be able to pick your times and really get those rates. She is quite good against Rakan, because Rakan can't pressure her super well early on, and her movement speed stuff is annoying, and she does have the W. Which makes it annoying to try to engage on her with your W. So good against Rakan. It's a nightmare against something like a Blitzcrank or a Pike. I've tried to play that before because she doesn't have any like dashes or ways to get away from stuff. So that feels really bad. And I suspect she can probably get bullied pretty hard by something like Zyra or Brand. She does have a heal, and you can heal your AD carry through a lot of stuff. And if you're constantly pushing with them, right, if you're auto attacking the wave, then your Q is going to come up fairly often, so you can cast that a lot. She does have a global ult. She does scale really well. She takes a little bit longer to come online than like a Zyra or a Brand. So if you're looking for a lane bully, she takes longer to come online, but I think she does have a bit more utility. She's not as dependent on gold, so she doesn't need as many items eventually. But it does take her a while to get to that point where she's just completely clapping people. And she is going to be quite vulnerable in the mid and late game when you're trying to rotate around, get through the river, establish vision, for Rift Heralds, Barons, Dragons, all of that. But she is good. So pressure early, really good scaling later, pretty good utility, sustain. I mean, she's still going to be solid. Janna has a high win rate. There might be some places that will put her in S tier. She does have like a 54% win rate. My problem is just twofold with Janna. First, she is historically pretty vulnerable against bully lanes. Because she's fairly low range. Her W is like 600-ish range. And so she's going to get outranged by Brand and Zyra, who really operate in like that 800 range type of space, and some spells are even further than that. So that's a problem. Her shield is on a really long cooldown early on. She doesn't have a heal. So she definitely can get bullied very hard by a lot of the sort of popular push and poke ADC metas. And she also doesn't have engage. So, yeah, someone like Rakan is also going to get pushed in and bullied by them. But I would say he deals with sustained poke longer than Janna does, because he has a heal and he has that shield on himself that comes up every so often for free. But he has engage, right? she does have very good vision control later on because she can also escape from, most things trying to chase her if she tries to get deep jungle vision. But she just can't pull the trigger. Like, she can get the vision, but it's a lot more difficult, I'll say, for her to pull the trigger and make a play off of that vision than it is for someone like a Rakan or a Blitzcrank or a Maokai. However, she does scale very well if your ADC is doing well, right? So if you just need to peel and protect the Fed, Smolder, Vayne, whatever, she's good at that. And those types of ADCs are pretty strong right now. Like, hyperscaling ADCs are strong, especially Smolder. So it just all depends how much do you want to trust your ADC. I mean, that's what it comes down to with Janna, and it's really hard to look them up pre-game now because they don't let you do that anymore. At least not in ways that I know of. Maybe there's some stuff you can download that'll show you that, but just naked client stuff, you can't see their names, you can't look them up on, Poor Professor or whatever without a third-party app, and I'm against using third-party stuff in-game. So you just don't know if your ADC is auto-filled or they're experienced or what, right? Unless you ask them and they tell you, but how many people are going to be honest? And it could be an insulting question. So, I don't know. She's good. She still does all the Janna things she's always done. Scales really hard in the late game. Very, very good if you have an ADC that's good, or even like another AD user out there. It's good. So, like, if you put her with a Zed or a Talon, she can still do well, or Rengar, because she gives that extra AD off of her shield. So, she's alright. I just, in general, am not a big fan of champs that don't have strong engage, or that also don't have, like, extreme lane pressure, right? And really high base damage or damage off of one item, which is like Zyra and Brand. So, moving on to them. I think Zyra and Brand are still quite strong. They did nerf each of them a little bit. And they did nerf Zazak, but it's still just a really good item with them. They can pressure early, do a ton of damage, and Leandri's is an extremely powerful item right now on them, and it does have health again. So that helps them not get blown up in just like one shot. So they're really, really good off of just a single item. And I think that's why they're probably two of my favorite damage dealing ADCs, because they just don't need a lot of items. Unlike something like Lux or Karma with Malignance or whatever, like, those champs can be good. And Karma is pretty good against stuff like Brand and Zyra if she consistently hits Qs. But they're just so good off of Leandri's and Zazak. They're just such abusers of those items. And Zyra with her plants just has really high base damage. Brand with his burn has really high damage. I think the difference between them, Zyra does have better vision control because you can use your plants around that vision. And I think she has better all-in, just, I'm going to one-shot burst you out of a bush if you sit around my vision, more so than Brand. Brand can still blow you up, obviously, if he hits everything on you. But I think Brand is a lot better in, like, tightly packed team fights where the enemy has, like, 3 melees or whatever. Brand's just going to be better in those situations. But both of them are going to contribute a ton of damage. You just have to be careful because they are very vulnerable to getting flanked and ganked, right? So if you're pushing up a lot and, the enemy ADC or enemy jungle or whatever gets behind you, that can be a problem. Obviously, they're each going to have a problem with Blitzcrank. Zyra can kind of deal with Blitz because you can put up a plant and actually block his hook. So if you see that he's going to hook you open field, you can actually, just like plant E like really quick and it'll put up a plant to eat the hook for you. You can also do that to eat the hook on the ADC, right? So that's really good if it's right in front of you. You got to be careful if you try to make a range plant though, because that Q does have a slight delay, so that might be too slow for the hook. So kind of tricky play to make, but that is on the table. Versus Brand, you have kind of no defense against Blitzhook, Nautilus, Leona, so all of that can be tough. But those are both quite good. No real surprises with their build. They both want to go Leandri's first, and then after that you can kind of see Rylai's is very popular because they're both basically damage over time champs, and that keeps the slow up for a long time. and then the critical damage off of I forgot what they call it, but the item where spells can crit are both, pretty good on them if you get their third item. It's unlikely. Most games you're probably just going to get Leandries and Rylai's, and that's probably going to be it unless you're turbo fed. But they do have some pretty good third options too. Okay, Leona. I have her a little bit above Nautilus just because she does have, more damage in the early game and she can engage through minions. So you're probably going to be getting pushed in a lot under tower if you're, any kind of melee champ right now against double ranged, which is super common bottom. But she can go through all of that, even if you're pushed in. She can go right through the minions. Now, sometimes you don't want to do that, obviously, if your ADC is going to lose a bunch of minions under tower, or you're going to take a bunch of damage doing that. But you have that option. A lot of these champs are very immobile, so they're not going to have a way to dodge you, and they're going to be very squishy, so you can blow them up really easily. So, yeah, she has just a ton of CC, quite high damage, and her ult is on a pretty low cooldown. So if you get ahead, especially, you can just completely zone the enemy out of the game. So she's very good, and especially around these early game skirmishes, if you roam around and you're trying to make plays on, grubs, rift, dragons, all of that, she's really good in those types of situations. So she can feel really bad if you fall behind, right? If you're just constantly getting poked under tower and your jungler just never comes and you just never see any opportunities to go in, you're just always too low health, it can be tough. Right? Or if the enemy has dashes, Mercury Treads, or Cleanse. I mean, that's a problem sort of like with Maokai, is stuff like Cleanse or Mikhail's or anything like that is going to be able to get rid of all of your CC. So that can be tough. But nevertheless, I think she's a very good aggressive support. And she has a pretty high win rate right now of like 53-ish type of percent. Okay, then we have Melio. He's getting played some in pro, and I think he's up there with Janna, in my opinion, as kind of the best defensive support right now. Janna has a much higher win rate. I think Melio's at like 50-51%, and Janna's at like 54 or something. And so I put Janna a little bit higher just to respect the win rate. But Melio just has so much like single target protection where it's very difficult to actually kill anybody that he goes on, because he's got that double shield, which ends up being a 300 something shield base that has like pretty good scaling on it, and he has his ult which cleanses, right? So that's an extra way to get away from the Maokai CC, get away from the Leona CC, and it even cleanses all of Maokai stuff, not just one person but everybody. So really really good against Maokai, very good against most other champs too. And he can be aggressive in trade, especially with these longer range ADCs early on. With that W plus Airy combo, that's healing, plus you're going to get like 2 or 3 shields off of Airy. So, early on, that's like an extra 60 shield for free every time you press that W. And he gives out bonus damage with his passive. So he does have some okay steroids, especially for early game trades. It's very difficult to trade when that's up, when he has all of his abilities up. And it's kind of hard to engage on him with engaged champs, right? Because he's got that pushback, very similar to like a Janna Tornado, where, if Rakan's trying to jump into him and, he's got hands and he's not lagging too much, he can push him back. Same thing with Leona. Maokai is a lot more difficult to peel at early levels towards her, but that's not going to help with engage. So overall, his win rate is fairly low, but if you do put him with a hyper carry, kind of like Janna, and you trust that they're going to be able to do okay in lane, it's, Vayne, Smolder, stuff like that, then he can be pretty good. But you don't have that hard engage. You can't hard punish people for disrespecting your vision around objectives. And again, I feel like that's one of the biggest opportunities to get free wins as a support, is to play a champ that gets good vision and hard punishes people for disrespecting your vision. Because they will, lower than diamond, even in low diamond, a lot of times they will disrespect that you could have vision of that area, and they'll just come up and walk into that bush, around dragon anyways, and you want to be able to take advantage of that. So he's good, but you're running a little bit of a risk. You're leaning a little bit heavier on something like an AD carry than you would with other roles. As a support, yes, you always rely on other roles, but if you're able to be proactive, get the vision, make the play, have the CC, lock them down, just basically throw your teammates the alley oop, a lot of them are going to be able to dunk it, right? Especially if you're pinging and communicating that well. So, anyways, moving on. So these champs are okay, and I could definitely see arguments when you get to tier 3. If you have a lot of practice on these champs, like especially Wei, I've been clapped by a Wei in the support role before. But these champs are all like pretty viable and pretty good, just depending on your situation, right? If you have a lot of practice on them, they could definitely move to A tier, maybe even S tier if you're very good on them. But Karma with the Malignance build, I went ahead and moved her up a little bit. It is good. That build is expensive though, right? So the Karma that's actually winning right now is going for stuff like Malignance, Death Cap, things like that, right? On a support budget, it's very difficult to buy those things though. And you're probably only going to get maybe one big item and one cheap item as a support. So you're not going to get that multiplicative scaling. That's why I like Zyra and Brand so much. If you want to play a damaging support, is because they really just need Leandries, and then it's kind of off to the races. They're just doing a ton of damage. Karma, I mean, you can say that with Malignance, but I just don't think it's contributing as much as something like a Zyra or a Brand. You also want levels with Karma, because I think her mantra reduces the Q by more based on level. I can't remember exactly. But, you probably want your Q and your E both to be maxed. As a support Karma, I think you really want to be maxing your E, right? Like maybe 3 points of Q in lane, then max your E. And obviously, like your empowered E is going to be the really good spell in team fights. And that just doesn't really have that much of an interaction with Malignance. So like casting empowered Qs is just not going to hit as hard if you don't have as much AP, if you don't have as much econ. So like I just feel like support Karma is far worse than mid or top lane Karma. And that is reflected in the win rates as well, I'm pretty sure. So like support Karma is like maybe 50% ish, right? But then if we go over to like mid Karma, I think that is almost 54%. So you're looking at a 3.5% win rate difference. And the main reason again is you actually have the gold if you're playing mid to be able to get a bunch of items that are going to have AP and stack, so that your Q actually hits for a lot, right? Versus it's going to kind of hit sort of like a wet noodle in a lot of situations, especially in the mid to late game if you're playing support, right? Because it just doesn't have very high base damage. It doesn't have the percentage health of Brand, and it just doesn't have the relatively high base damages of Zyra's plants. And she's not getting that interaction with Leandries that's constantly being reapplied in the same way as those champs. So, yes, she can be good. Yes, she does bully really well early on, but if you want the bully early, that can also scale a lot better with enchanter items, I would highly recommend something like Emilio. Or even if you think you're going to be able to get the push and get ahead and be the bully yourself, you could even do it with Janna, just take like Zazuk plus Mandate, which is very common on her right now. Then she actually can, if you're able to walk up and just spam W's on people, like she can actually throw down some pretty good bullying early on. It's just when you're up against another bully, you might get shut down. But Nautilus, I've nudged him down a little bit on this patch. He's being played in pro. A lot of situations in pro, he's paired with Senna, and it's kind of that degenerate fasting Senna stuff that's going on, and he actually scales pretty well with items, with gold, compared to some other tanks you can play, like your Tom Kenches and stuff, who Tom is still very popular with Senna too. But it's a situational thing in pro. In solo queue, he has one of the lowest win rates of pretty much all mainstream supports. He's like 49 or 50%. And the big reason for that is a couple. First, he is very vulnerable to getting bullied early on by these champs because he can't go through the minion wave at all, right? So if they're constantly pushing into you and just hiding behind the minions, they're just going to poke and push you under tower a lot, and that's a problem. Like, you do have your shield with the W, but it's on a fairly long cooldown. They did reduce the cost, which is cool. But it's just really hard to get a look at them to hit them with those hooks. Now, I guess you could say the same thing about Blitz, right? But Blitz's hook is so much more devastating than Nautilus's hook if you land it. Excuse me. Yeah, so much more damage early on. And Blitz's hook can go over walls, right? So later in the game, you can make those plays versus Nautilus is one of the only engaged champs where his sort of engage tool doesn't go over a wall. So that does limit his opportunities later on in the game as well. His damage is fairly low for an all-in champ in the early game. His ult is obviously very good as an engage tool later on in the game, but it's just the combination of low damage, difficulty in getting your engage pre-6, and vulnerability to poke that I think knocks him down a little bit. But if you are good on him, if you do have, obviously, like, really good at roaming mid, you just roam mid, press R on him whenever the missile hits him, you know, you hit him with your Q, and they're probably going to die. And he does have pretty good wave clear for a tank as well. Now, a lot of people are maxing Q on him, which means your E is not going to clear as well. But if you do max E instead, that can be pretty good in extended team fights if you're not going to die by sitting in the middle. And just, you know, it can help set up the wave for your solo laners or your AD to push and try to get to objectives faster. So he obviously does have some redeeming qualities, but I feel like it is kind of rough, especially in the early game. Really high-level Nautilus players can make very good use of his mechanics, though. So, like, using his hook as a displacement to stop other champs from engaging. So if you have, like, a Zac flying over a wall and you hook him mid-air, it'll actually, you know, stop his flight, right? Or if you have a Leona that's trying to E onto your AD carry and you hook them, it stops that. Because it counts as a displacement. So, you know, you do have a lot of opportunities where you can potentially outplay, but I think he is struggling right now win rate wise, and that's a few of the reasons why. Alistar is seeing some play in pro, and I'll go ahead and finish up in the next 5 minutes or so, but I'll mention a few of these other champs. Alistar is okay. He does have sustain for both yourself and your ally, and I think it doesn't heal the minions anymore, I don't think. But he is pretty good at poke. He can't, or like dealing with poke for a melee champion. His WQ, he can kind of do it anywhere, right? So he can go through the minions with it. His damage is somewhat low. People can dodge your WQ if they have a blink or a flash or whatever, unlike something like a Maokai. His range is fairly low. I think his headbutt is 600, so it's very similar to Maokai. Maokai's a little bit shorter range, but that is tough. Now, you can tower dive very early with him very effectively. So he's, you know, still one of the kings of tower dive once you get his ultimate. So if you're going to be playing strong side, if, you know, the jungler is committed to constantly diving, you know, your lane and just completely shutting down that smolder or whatever, he's very, very good at that. Now, a lot of other tanks can kind of do that to some extent. Like Maokai can reset tower shot aggro if you W onto a minion because you go untargetable when you do that. So you can soak a tower shot and redirect the tower aggro on Maokai if you save your W for that. Typically you're using the W to try to lock down the person under the tower, so it requires a little bit of planning. But anyways, he's great at diving, he's got great engage, damage is a little low early on. But if you have an aggressive lane or you suspect you're going to be strong side, if the jungler is going to gank for you, you know, he can be really good. So he's okay. I think he's got a pretty good win rate, 52, 53%. He's a good, solid tank. I just feel like, again, the limited range and a little bit lower damage, that just makes me want to put him. And just the amount of CC that he has, it's mostly single target, where it's like WQ. You're probably hitting one person, maybe two, and that's kind of it. And he has very long cooldowns, right? Versus something like Maokai, again, that's going to like CC the whole team, you know, has an undodgeable W, or Rakan, who, you know, can CC a whole bunch of different people with his ultimate. You know, I would say the main reason to pick Alistar is for the early dives, if you think you're going to be able to coordinate that well. And then Renata, okay poke champion. Really good if you have a hyper carry that you want to protect, with her basically glorified Zillion ult. Does also give attack speed. So if you put her, with a Smolder, you need to peel, especially if they have a bunch of melee champs that are going to have a hard time dodging your ult. She's pretty good. She is vulnerable to getting poked down early on, by your Zyras, your Brands, your Luxes, just all of these ranged champions that are so popular right now. So that's my only real reservation, is that her damage is a little lackluster early on. She needs items, but if that revive and the attack speed is very valuable for you on a Vayne, Smolder, stuff like that, she can be pretty good. I think her protection is a little bit more situational than like Emilio or a Janna, and that's how I have her down a little bit lower. But I think she can still be quite strong. Now, if you're able to land a lot of your auto attacks, and so is your AD carry, if you're on comms with each other, and it's like Caitlyn, Renata, and you're just both constantly auto attacking, and you're getting a lot of value out of her passive for that extra bonus damage, then she's really good. But I think that's hard to coordinate under Diamond, and especially if you're not on comms. Okay, Lux is good. I don't think I had her in A tier last time, but she's still quite strong. I mean, she has really good range. She's pretty good at bullying these champs because she outranges them in lane. She just gets outscaled by them because they're so good with the Leandries early on. And the base damage on her laser at level 6 is pretty good, but it doesn't scale that well. It doesn't have true damage. She's just not going to get enough AP for it to really matter a lot of times. But nevertheless, she does have really good vision with her E as well, so she's one of the best at, being able to establish vision around brushes without taking that risk of walking up. So that's nice. She does have the shield, which definitely does come into play sometimes. That has been nerfed over time. But, I mean, she's good. She has a 2-second bind, so she can actually engage from pretty far away. So that's something that Zyra and Brand struggle with a little bit more. Zyra can do it, but I would say the root is more difficult to land. It's a bit slower moving. It can't go through minions. Or actually, it can. Sorry, I don't know why I said that. But I feel like Zyra's root is harder to land than Lux's bind. But she's alright. I mean, play her if you want. I think she can be pretty good. It's just, again, her damage, especially in that mid-game on one item, is going to be lower in team fights, in particular, than Zyra or Brand. But she can bully them early on. Ashe is very popular in Pro, but you have to be able to walk up and just constantly auto-attack and just constantly put pressure down, have good situational awareness of the jungler, of mid lane, because if you get roamed on, you're dead. If you get engaged on, you take one step too far forward, and, the Maokai hits you with the W, or Blitz hits you with a hook or whatever, you're dead. So she can apply early pressure if you land a lot of autos. You have to also understand the wave and make sure you're not going to be taking too much minion aggro. But if you're an advanced player, if you play a lot of her and you know how to space properly, she can be pretty strong. Her damage falls off a cliff later on. But if you do go for Mandate plus the Claw, like, you get a lot of damage amplification, and you have really good engage with your ultimate later on in the game, right? Arrow is one of the best engage tools out there. It's on a fairly low cooldown. You do provide lots of slows for people, but if it's just YOLO Q, there's 40 kills in the game, and you're just having to walk up and down the river, trying to establish vision for Baron, or trying to establish vision for, Dragon Soul or whatever in the mid to late game, she's going to really struggle, I think, a lot of times, because you're just going to die to anything. A stiff breeze, you're dead. Right, so really, really vulnerable, but if you can make the aggro work early, I think she can be strong. Okay, and that's going to be it. I do want to keep this under an hour. Like I said, really anything in B tier, if you play it a lot, you can make it work. You can definitely get wins. There are certain combinations, champions they do very well with, champions they counter. So I think the meta's in an overall pretty good spot. I think a lot of stuff is viable. So, don't get too offended if I don't have your favorite champs in the top list. I'm sure you can still win with it. But anyways, that's it. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you have some other ideas about what you're enjoying so far as support. And otherwise, have a great day, and I'll see you next time.